In the shadows of World War II, far from the public triumphs celebrated in parades and speeches, there remained documents that were never meant to surface. They were sealed in steel cabinets, stamped with red ink warnings, buried in basements of ministries, or hidden deep within the classified annexes of Soviet, British, and American intelligence archives. These files tell of betrayals so dark they could fracture the fragile myths that held post-war alliances together. They describe pacts struck not in daylight, but in cellars and ruined cities, decisions signed not with honor, but with desperation. When the smoke of battle lifted and the flags of victory were raised, the public never saw the blood trails that stretched behind the curtains of secrecy. From the ruins of Warsaw, where entire districts were sacrificed in covert agreements, to the forests of East Prussia, where German divisions executed their own men under code names never spoken aloud. The war was waged not only on battlefields, but in secret rooms where the value of human life was calculated in cold margins. The world remembers the liberation of camps and the trials of Nuremberg, but lost within restricted documents are stories of perpetrators quietly exfiltrated into Western intelligence networks, protected for their usefulness while justice was staged for public eyes. And beneath the frozen waters off Norway's coast, evidence still lingers of phantom submarines that carried forbidden technology across oceans, their existence erased from official naval records. What you are about to hear are not tales of glory, but revelations once locked behind iron vaults, truths deliberately obscured, waiting decades to resurface. These are the disturbing classified watch truths the world was never meant to know. Chapter 1. The Ominous Pact. Beneath Warsaw. Ruins beneath the shattered skyline of Warsaw in 1943. While German banners still fluttered over the city's ruins, an agreement was brokered in secrecy that would doom thousands more than the bombs already had. The Gestapo's File No. 17, later recovered from a half-burned cache in a Berlin bunker, outlined Operation Black Ash, a covert plan orchestrated by senior SS intelligence officers desperate to delay the Soviet advance. They approached remnants of the Polish Blue Police, men despised by their countrymen for their collaboration, yet equally fearful of Stalin's wrath. According to Soviet NKVD transcripts declassified in 1987, these men agreed to manipulate resistance activity to create the illusion of a stronger uprising, drawing the Red Army into premature assaults while the Germans slipped through escape corridors. The plan's environment was a city already hollowed by siege. Jagged brick walls framed streets filled with rubble and smoke, and the acrid stench of cordite mixed with the sweet rot of unburied bodies. In this desolate landscape, messengers carrying false intelligence crossed sewer tunnels at night, their boots splashing in stagnant water as they delivered codes suggesting phantom divisions and non-existent fortifications. Bletchley Park intercepts captured snippets of these transmissions, fragments of Enigma decrypts with dates like 14 August, 1944, and coordinates pointing to the Mokotów district, but British analysts, aware of the deception, chose silence to protect their code-breaking advantage. The gravity of that decision is felt in eyewitness accounts, Polish civilians waving makeshift flags from windows, believing rescue was near, even as their neighborhoods were marked for sacrifice. When the Warsaw Uprising erupted in August 1944, the SS calculated its moves with brutal efficiency. Districts like Wola and Ochota became killing fields, their defenders unaware they had been made pawns in a larger game. Soviet tanks paused at the Vistula River, their engines idling in the distance, while Stalin's generals debated the political value of a destroyed Polish resistance. Meanwhile, caches of Wehrmacht rifles and Panzerfausts were buried beneath debris, not abandoned, but reserved for bargaining in the chaotic post-war vacuum. In the winter of 1945, when Red Army units finally pushed through the ruins, they discovered stockpiles untouched by retreating Germans, their serial numbers logged in hastily scribbled NKVD notes marked, "For Kremlin eyes only." The silence that followed was deafening. Survivors who whispered of betrayal were dismissed as paranoid, their voices drowned out by triumphant Allied narratives. Yet scattered documents told a different story. A British SIS memorandum stamped classified on 9th March. 1945 referenced, potentially, damaging disclosures regarding Warsaw coordination, while a Soviet report from Lubyanka detailed unacceptable compromises by local collaborators, sanctioned indirectly by German command. In 1964, when a fragment of Gestapo File No. 17 surfaced during a West German parliamentary inquiry. It vanished from evidence within weeks. Researchers who pursued it found doors closed, archives sealed, and careers threatened. The city itself still bears the scars, buildings rebuilt over mass graves, streets renamed to erase the memories. But in basements of old ministries and hidden folders of intelligence agencies, the truth persists. Warsaw's destruction was not solely the product of German cruelty or Soviet hesitation, but a calculated move in a shadow war fought behind closed doors. The civilians waving white and red, banners from shattered windows never knew they had been written off in a game of survival played by men whose signatures would later vanish beneath ink smears and classified stamps. In the quiet of the ruined city, among the rubble and the ashes, history's most unsettling secret waited decades to be unearthed. Chapter 2. Operation Iron Wolf's Forgotten Executions. In the dense, frost-bitten forests of East Prussia during the final winter of World War II, desperation stalked the retreating Wehrmacht. The official German command narrative of organized withdrawal concealed a darker truth, one whispered only in fragments within declassified KGB reports unearthed. After the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991, these reports described a directive issued under the codename Operation Iron Wolf, signed off by SS Brigade Führer Ernst Günther Baader and disseminated through Totenkopf Division channels on 12th of January 1945. Its purpose was brutal and precise: eliminate all potential defectors, deserters, or witnesses to unauthorized atrocities before the Eastern Front crumbled entirely. The environment was one of chaos. Snow-laden pines groaned under the weight of bitter winds, while abandoned villages smoldered in the wake of scorched earth orders. Disguised field police squads, men wearing mismatched uniforms with forged insignia, traversed night roads lit only by distant artillery flashes. They issued counterfeit redeployment orders to companies suspected of wavering loyalty, drawing these unsuspecting soldiers into ambush sites along forest clearings. Survivors who later gave testimony to NKVD interrogators spoke of moonlit executions, of comrades kneeling in frozen mud while Totenkopf officers read out charges of treachery fabricated moments earlier. The echoes of rifle fire were absorbed by the forest, leaving no witnesses but the trees. British intelligence was not blind to these events. Decrypted Enigma traffic from Bletchley Park, marked in archival references as decrypt batch. CX-MSS Ultra 4029 recorded unusual German troop movements around Insterburg on 19th of January 1945. Analysts suspected internal purges but, fearing to expose their code-breaking success, chose silence. In one memo stamped "Most Secret," a cryptographer noted, "Evidence suggests internal liquidation. Advise no action." The Allies' choice preserved strategic advantage but condemned countless German conscripts to death at their own army's hands. Villagers who stumbled upon shallow mass graves were silenced. Soviet troops occupying East Prussia in spring 1945 recorded the testimonies of two women from Angerap who discovered executed German soldiers among birch roots near their farmstead. Their statements, archived in GRU file 201A, describe bodies with identification tags removed, boots stripped, and faces partially burned. These women, branded as collaborators, were deported to labor camps, their accounts buried with them in the Gulag system's labyrinthine files. The paranoia behind Operation Iron Wolf was not isolated. German high command feared not only Soviet capture, but also the potential bargaining of incriminating knowledge to advancing Allied forces. Some of the executed were low-ranking clerks and drivers who had seen too much. Lists of confiscated Jewish property, rosters of forced labor convoys, or casualty reports doctored to conceal war crimes. The Totenkopf Division, already infamous for massacres in France and the Eastern Front, carried out these murders with clinical detachment. Surviving photographs, discovered in a GRU naval archive mislabeled as logistics, depict men with Totenkopf insignia standing over fresh graves, their expressions cold, the winter air fogging around them like ghosts. The operation's scale remains uncertain. Estimates vary wildly. Some historians argue hundreds, others tens of thousands. But what is undeniable is the systematic nature of the purge. A post-war Soviet memo dated 3rd June 1946 referenced persistent rumors among German POWs of Iron Wolf killings, urging Moscow to suppress the matter to avoid destabilizing their post-war narrative of Red Army liberation. In the West, journalists probing the Totenkopf Division's final months encountered vanished witnesses and sealed records. The Federal Republic of Germany's own archives lists several Totenkopf officers as unaccounted for between January and April 1945, men believed to have disappeared through escape networks like Odessa or simply dissolved into new identities. The forests of East Prussia are quieter now, dotted with memorial stones to civilians, but few to the nameless soldiers executed by their own comrades. The snow covers the shallow depressions where bodies once lay, and only fragments, spent shell casings, rusted dog tags without numbers, emerge each spring when the thaw comes. Operation Iron Wolf's story remained hidden because it was inconvenient for all sides. For Germany, it was shame. For the Allies, a reminder of choices made in the shadows. For the Soviets, another detail to control in the shaping of history. What survives are whispers in declassified pages, and the uneasy knowledge that even in its death throes, the Third Reich turned its guns inward, ensuring that secrets died with the men who might have told them. Chapter 3. The Silent Conspiracy of Ravensbrück. Trials in the bitter winter of 1946. As Europe's cities smoldered under the weight of reconstruction and famine, a concentration camp in northern Germany, Ravensbrück, stood as a charred monument to systematic cruelty. The camp, once a women's prison under SS administration, had been liberated months earlier by Soviet forces, who found skeletal survivors wandering among barracks littered with personal belongings, surgical instruments, and hastily destroyed records. What the world believed would become a straightforward pursuit of justice quickly spiraled into a covert bargain, one buried so deep in intelligence files that it would not resurface for decades. Declassified CIA papers from 1978, stamped Eyes Only, Directorate of Operations, referenced a clandestine effort to extract select SS medical officers and camp overseers from the looming Nuremberg process. Under early frameworks that would later be formalized as Operation Paperclip, these perpetrators were quietly exfiltrated to serve Western intelligence services in chemical interrogation and psychological warfare programs. The setting of post-war Germany provided fertile ground for secrecy. Lübeck's outskirts, where displaced persons camps and ruined warehouses formed a labyrinth of shadows, hosted secret negotiations between British SIS operatives and former SS personnel desperate to avoid the gallows. A British memorandum dated 12th of February 1946, located in public Record Office File HS 8211, described reallocation of certain assets from Ravensbrück and advised complete discretion regarding Soviet notification. These assets were not blueprints or machines, but human beings whose experiments on prisoners had left permanent scars on hundreds. Soviet prosecutors at the Nuremberg sub-trials protested bitterly, citing affidavits collected from camp survivors who detailed chemical burns, sterilization experiments, and hypothermia tests performed without anesthesia. Their protests were overridden amid growing Western suspicion of Stalin's intentions. Inside Ravensbrück itself, the evidence told stories words could barely contain. The camp's crematorium still bore the residue of thousands of incinerations, while a nearby pond held bones discarded in haste as Allied bombers closed in. Surviving inmates described the distinctive smells of antiseptics and burning flesh, the pale green walls of the surgical barracks, and the chilling presence of doctors like Dr. Hertha Oberhäuser, whose sadistic procedures later became infamous. Yet, according to a CIA field report from 1952 labeled Project Confident, 5 of her former colleagues, less well known but equally implicated, were relocated to secret facilities in West Germany under assumed identities. There, they reportedly instructed fledgling intelligence operatives in advanced interrogation methods derived directly from their wartime atrocities. The Western powers justified their actions as a necessity of the emerging Cold War. By late 1946, the Soviet Union had absorbed Eastern Europe into its sphere of influence, and whispers of Soviet biological warfare research reached Western ears. A US Army Counterintelligence Corps memo dated 3rd of March 1947 warned of significant Soviet progress in psychological conditioning and suggested the West could not afford moral hesitation if it meant falling behind. Thus, men and women once complicit in mass murder were offered new lives, their records quietly altered or destroyed. Some appeared later under different names in medical conferences or intelligence workshops. their pasts cleansed by classified directives. For decades, the Ravensbrück trials were portrayed as a model of post-war justice. Photographs of defendants in the dock and grainy footage of judges pronouncing sentences became part of the public's understanding of Allied righteousness. But hidden correspondence between SIS and OSS operatives reveals that even as verdicts were announced, lists of exempted names circulated through secure channels. One American agent, in a 1948 letter discovered in a declassified bundle labeled Berlin Station, wrote, "Publicly, we have drawn a line. Privately, we redraw it daily. The camp itself was left to decay, its ruins a silent witness to the duplicity. Locals avoided the site, haunted by rumors of nighttime visits by unmarked vehicles in the early years after the war. Perhaps couriers retrieving buried files or ensuring that what remained of the camp's evidence could not be re-examined. Survivors who spoke too loudly found themselves marginalized or accused of exaggeration. Some, like Polish resistance courier Zofia Posmish, wrote veiled references to these betrayals in memoirs, only for publishers to reject or edit out such passages, citing political sensitivities during the Cold War. By the time the CIA's declassification process in the late 1970s revealed fragments of these operations, many key players were dead or had disappeared. Journalists attempting to follow the trail faced stonewalling from Western governments and disinformation campaigns, painting their inquiries as Soviet propaganda. A BBC reporter in 1981 noted, "Every archive we open has pages torn out. Every lead ends with a closed door or a warning." The silent conspiracy of Ravensbrück trials remains a grim reminder that history is written not just by victors, but by survivors of bureaucracy and opportunism. The world remembers Nuremberg as a triumph of justice. But beneath the surface, the machinery of Cold War realpolitik churned, consuming moral boundaries and rewriting the fates of the guilty. Somewhere in a sealed vault or an unmarked grave, the full list of names still exists, a testament to a war that did not end cleanly, and to a truth the world was never meant to hear spoken aloud. Chapter 4. The Phantom Submarines of Operation Caesar off the rugged Norwegian coast. Beneath waters so cold they can steal a diver's breath in seconds. A secret from the dying days of the Third Reich has remained entombed for decades. Official history records that Operation Caesar, Germany's desperate bid to deliver advanced weapons technology to its Axis partner Japan, ended on 9th February 1945, when HMS Venturer torpedoed U-864. But fragments pried from GRU naval archives and declassified Japanese wartime files suggest a broader, far darker mission. At least 2 additional U-boats may have slipped through the North Sea undetected, carrying uranium oxide, jet turbine blueprints, and prototype guidance systems that could alter the balance of post-war power. The recovered Kriegsmarine log fragment, catalogued in 1977 by a Norwegian salvage diver, contained coordinates inconsistent with U-864's final journey. Scrawled in faded pencil were the words Weiterfahrt, Kiel Befehl, Schattenboote, continue voyage, Kiel Command, Phantom Boats. Intelligence analysts in London dismissed it publicly, but a secret Admiralty memorandum dated 14th June 1945, classified Most Secret, Submarine Activity, Westfjords, advised suppression of unverified contacts detected by sonar off Bergen in late April. These unexplained sonar traces were later corroborated by US Navy decrypts stored under the codename Sea Lantern, indicating unusual radio silence from known U-boat call signs. Japanese. Records captured in 1946 under Operation Stella. Wind reveal references to materials arriving by undersea courier after Berlin's fall. Among these were schematics for Messerschmitt jet engines and early radar-absorbing coatings, details that quietly influenced post-war research both in Japan and, indirectly, in American and Soviet laboratories, once the Allies divided spoils. In a 1953 CIA field briefing marked Eyes Only, Pacific Operations, analysts noted that traces of enriched uranium found in confiscated Japanese research labs did not match known domestic sources. The ocean floor near Fedje Island still bears scars from that era. Mercury flasks from U-864 leak into the water even today, contaminating marine life, a toxic whisper from a war that should have ended in 1945. Norwegian fishermen occasionally snag twisted metal in their nets, sometimes finding fragments of pressure holes that do not match U-864's design. Local divers speak of eerie sonar echoes, faint metallic knocks beneath the waves, and uncharted wreckage strewn across trenches where no official sinkings occurred. Their reports, sent to naval authorities, are met with silence or polite dismissal. In the tense years of the early Cold War, neither East nor West wanted the world to know that Nazi technology might have fueled the arms race. Soviet naval reports marked Arkhangelsk Command, Priority Black, mentioned shadowing unidentified submarines in the Barents Sea as late as summer 1945. Meanwhile, British Foreign Office cables reveal concern that public knowledge of phantom subs could undermine post-war stability and confidence in Allied naval supremacy. Even in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, US Navy intelligence briefly reopened Operation Caesar files after detecting anomalous radiation, readings off Guam, only to close the inquiry within weeks. What haunts historians is the possibility that these phantom submarines delivered not just technology, but personnel, scientists, engineers, or SS officers whose knowledge could buy protection. A Japanese Navy report from August 1945 references European advisors arriving through special channels, individuals who vanished amid the chaos of surrender. Their expertise may have been absorbed quietly into American and Soviet projects, their Nazi affiliations erased. Decades later, scattered testimonies from retired intelligence officers hint at covert interrogations in Pacific Island outposts, where men with German accents spoke of voyages that never officially occurred. Today, sonar images occasionally reveal long, slender shadows beneath the Norwegian Sea, shapes too intact to be natural formations. Environmental teams mapping mercury contamination sometimes record unexplained metallic signatures kilometers from U-864's known wreck. Each new discovery is quietly folded into classified reports, maintaining the official story that Operation Caesar ended with one torpedo and one sinking. But the evidence tells a different tale, that the war's embers burned beneath the waves, fueling the ambitions of new superpowers. The phantom submarines of Operation Caesar remain silent beneath the saltwater graves, their cargo perhaps long removed, their logs forever absent from official history. Yet the ocean remembers, and in its depths lies proof that the Second World War's shadows stretched far beyond the day the guns fell silent. In the wake of these revelations, the world is left staring into the abyss of its own manufactured myths. The heroic narratives taught in classrooms and celebrated on anniversaries dissolve when confronted with the shadowed corridors of suppressed history. The ominous Pact. Beneath Warsaw ruins exposes a city not merely crushed by war, but betrayed by secret calculations. Operation Iron Wolf's forgotten executions reminds us that fear and paranoia drove the Reich to devour itself in its final hours, silencing voices that might have revealed inconvenient truths. The silent conspiracy of Ravensbrück trials pulls back the curtain on justice manipulated for strategic advantage, where atrocities architects were granted amnesty to fuel the next great geopolitical rivalry. And the phantom submarines of Operation Caesar shows that even oceans could not hide the ambition of a collapsing empire, nor the willingness of victors to bury evidence when it suited them. The questions linger like smoke over ruined cities. What else remains locked away in archives, mislabeled, or deliberately destroyed? How many stories have been lost beneath political necessity, or rewritten to maintain fragile alliances? As modern nations continue to wield secrecy as a weapon, these files remind us that the past is not a fixed monument, but a contested battlefield. Somewhere in sealed vaults, faded photographs, and unnamed graves, more fragments wait, pieces of a history the world was never meant to see. The war may have ended in 1945, but its buried truths still echo, demanding to be heard by those willing to look where others dared not.